There was something about her bubbly, free-spirited, boldly unapologetic. You know the type. Sunrise yoga, kombucha in hand. Probably never touched a mink coat, and wouldn't be caught dead in one as she had. Boulder was beautiful, no doubt. But it wasn't our world. You were Satanta people briefcases, deadlines, coffee-fueled mornings. Boulder? It was more barefoot hikes and crystal healing. Then there was John Ramsey. He had that look quiet. It's unreadable, the kind of expression that made people pause and wonder, what's going on in this guy's head? He was the first to find JonBenet. Picked her up, held her, and just like that, the crime scene was compromised. Any hope of preserving evidence? Gone. Strangely, though, the police didn't press him hard. Not the way they questioned Patsy. Not like they did Burke. Odd, considering he was the head of the household, the one in charge. But somehow people saw him as just a grieving, harmless father in the background. Was that the truth? Or did he know more than he let on? So, who was John Ramsey really? Let's go back. JonBenet Ramsey was born in Lincoln, Nebraska. He wasn't just a wealthy man cloaked in mystery, he was sharp. He earned an electrical engineering degree from Michigan State in 1966. Then returned for an MBA in 1971. Not bad. He started in the Navy, joining the Civil Engineer Corps, served 3 years in the Philippines, and spent another 8 in the reserves down in Atlanta. Oh, and he's a licensed pilot, not just any pilot. He owned 2 private planes. You don't have 2 planes unless you're either seriously into flying or seriously hate TSA. He came from a military family. His father, James J. Ramsey, was a decorated World War II pilot. His mother, Mary Jane, helped shape his early life in Nebraska. From there, he built what looked like the perfect life career. Money, family, at least from the outside. But of course, appearances can be deceiving. And in John's case, that's the million-dollar question. Right? Was he just the unlucky man at the center of a national tragedy, or was he more involved than anyone dared to believe? John Ramsey's personal life was anything but simple. He first married in 1966 to Lucinda Pash. Together, they had 3 children, Elizabeth, Melinda, and John Andrew. For a while, things seemed stable until they weren't. The marriage ended in 1978, after about 11 years. No major scandal, at least not publicly. Just one of those quiet divorces where the reasons never really made the headlines. 2 years later, in 1980, John married Patsy Ramsey. Patsy, a former beauty queen, was known for her big smile and even bigger presence. They had 2 children together, Burke and their youngest, JonBenet, Patricia Ramsey. Born on August 6, 1990, the little girl with the golden curls would later become the center of one of the most haunting and widely discussed mysteries in America. As a father, John wasn't the distant, always working type. He was present, showed up for his kids' events, supported their activities, paid the bills, seemed to embrace the role of dad as much as CEO. By 1996, the Ramseys were living in a large, elegant home on 15th Street in Boulder, Colorado. John's career had taken off. Back in 1989, he founded a tech company called Advanced Product Group, which later merged with other firms to form Access Graphics. Under John's leadership as CEO, the company didn't just grow, it skyrocketed. By 1996, Access Graphics had pulled in over $1 billion in revenue. Not exactly small potatoes. That same year, he was named Entrepreneur of the Year by the Boulder Chamber of Commerce. By May, his net worth was estimated at $6.4 million. Just weeks before Christmas, he received a $118,000 bonus. That's the kind of money most people don't see in a decade. He saw it on top of his regular paycheck. But John wasn't just a business success story. Around the holidays, he and his family were regulars at church and community events, especially at St. John's Episcopal Church in Boulder. There's no official record of every event they attended in the days leading up to Christmas, but by all accounts, they were the kind of family who showed up, smiled for the camera, and looked the part of the happy, picture-perfect household. Of course, we all know money titles. Big houses don't always tell the whole story. John wasn't just the guy running a million-dollar company. He was also the dad cheering in the front row of JonBenet's beauty pageants. Most of the glitter, hairspray, and tight scheduling came from Patsy herself, a pageant queen in her younger days, but John played his role too. Whether it was watching rehearsals, holding the camcorder, or smiling proudly from the sidelines, he was involved. Just before Christmas, JonBenet had even made an appearance at a local shopping mall. And it's very likely John was right there with her. Presence wasn't performative. It was part of how he parented. Present, visible, and supportive. Beyond family life. John and Patsy were well connected in Boulder's social circles. They mingled with other prominent families, like the Whites and the Steins. On December 23, 1996, just 2 days before everything would change, the Ramseys attended a Christmas party at the home of their close friends, Fleet and Priscilla White. The guest list, Erie Boulder, were well connected. That night was a big one for the Ramseys, socially speaking. Before heading over to the Whites' house, they'd hosted their own holiday gathering at their home on 15th Street. From around 5 o'clock to 8 p.m., their place was packed 30 to 40 guests. A mix of family, friends, and kids, darting around in Christmas sweaters. There was even a Santa impersonator, Bill McReynolds, who stopped by to spread a little extra holiday magic. The kids decorated gingerbread houses, adults sipped drinks, and mingled. It all looked from the outside like the perfect holiday scene. One moment that stood out: Patsy gifted JonBenet a gold bracelet engraved with her name and the date. December 25, 1996, a sweet, sentimental gift that now feels chillingly symbolic. As if that wasn't enough on their calendar, John had also been busy making travel arrangements. The Ramseys owned a vacation home in Charlevoix, Michigan, and planned to fly out right after Christmas to visit John's older children, Melinda and John Andrew, from his first marriage. John, a licensed pilot, had arranged to fly the family there himself. Classic Ramsey. Family time with a touch of luxury. So yes, the days leading up to Christmas were a whirlwind. Work, family, parties, travel plans. A calendar full of joy and normalcy. At least on the surface, because what happened next would shatter that picture-perfect life. Christmas Day, 1996. Everything seemed ordinary at the Ramsey home. JonBenet, 6 years old, wore a black and white holiday outfit, possibly showing off her new bracelet. Friends stopped by: R.A. Brown, Priscilla White's parents, and a man named Cliff Gaston, who was close to the family. John Ramsey hosted, played the part, mingled. Nothing particularly memorable about his actions that day, just a regular, festive Christmas. But then something odd happened that evening. At around 6:48 p.m., a 911 call was made from the Ramsey home, but it was cut off before anyone spoke. When dispatch tried to call back, no one answered. So, as standard procedure, an officer was dispatched to check things out. A family friend, Susan Stein, answered the door. She assured the officer it was nothing. Maybe someone had accidentally dialed while trying to order medication for an elderly relative. It didn't seem serious, so the officer left. A report was filed. End of story, at least at the time. The rest of Christmas carried on like any other. JonBenet received a new bike. The family opened gifts, ate dinner, and eventually called it a night. Later, John would say he carried JonBenet to bed after all the excitement. Some believe she may have eaten pineapple that night, but whether that's true, and who gave it to her, has never been definitively confirmed. Then came the morning of December 26. This is where everything changes around. Patsy woke up and went downstairs to make coffee. The family was supposed to fly to Michigan that day, with John piloting the trip himself. But not long after waking, Patsy went to check on JonBenet and found her bed empty. Panic set in instantly. A few minutes later, Patsy discovered a handwritten ransom note on a staircase. It was long, 3 pages in. It demanded a strangely specific amount of money, $118,000. The exact amount of John's Christmas bonus. The note claimed JonBenet had been kidnapped. Patsy rushed to wake John, and the two of them began frantically searching the house. No sign of their daughter. They checked on their son Berkey, was still asleep. Then, at 5:52 a.m., Patsy placed a second 911 call. That call has been scrutinized ever since. Instead of immediately stating the emergency, Patsy started by giving the family's address. Maybe she was trying to be efficient. Maybe some argue it sounded rehearsed, like she was following a script. When Patsy finally explained what was going on during the 911 call, she said, "We have a kidnapping, not. My daughter's been taken." It was a small choice of words, but one that made people pause. It felt like she was distancing herself from the situation. Throughout the call, she kept talking about the ransom note, almost obsessively, before even saying that JonBenet was missing. That struck some as odd, like the note was taking priority over the child. She also repeatedly referred to JonBenet as our daughter, or used we instead of saying my daughter, which gave some listeners the impression of emotional detachment. Another detail that stood out: the word please. She said it over and over, all polite. It felt overly rehearsed to some, like she was trying too hard to sound panicked. But maybe the most unsettling part was what she didn't say. She never once asked, "What should I do?" Or "How do we get her back?" Questions you'd expect from a terrified parent. She also never mentioned that the ransom note explicitly warned them not to call the police. For most people, that would have been the first thing out of their mouth, and then there's what happened after she hung up. The 911 line stayed open for a few seconds longer. You can hear voices in the background. One that sounds like John says, "We're not speaking to you." And then, a voice believed to be Patsy's, repeatedly saying, "What did you do? What did you do?" Some theorized they were speaking to Burke, their son, who they claimed had slept through the entire ordeal. If true, that would be disturbing. So was the call genuine panic or something else? That question still haunts the case. When police arrived, John appeared cooperative. He handed over the ransom note, answered initial questions, and called close friends Fleet and Priscilla White to come over for support. That decision turned out to be a major problem. Those friends entered the house before it was secured as a crime scene. Some even helped tidy up, cleaning the kitchen, moving items. For investigators, this set off alarm bells. Why bring people in when the note explicitly said not to contact anyone? Maybe it was just stress. People don't always make rationale decisions in crisis, but it didn't sit right. Then came the moment that truly changed everything. All morning, police had been searching the home, but for reasons still debated, they never fully checked the basement. Then, around 1 p.m., the lead detective asked John and Fleet to do a final walkthrough of the house. They went directly to a small back room in the basement to storage space for Christmas decorations. That's where John found JonBenet's body. She was lying on the floor beneath a white blanket. Duct tape covered her mouth, and a garrote made from a broken paintbrush handle was wrapped tightly around her neck. John picked her up and carried her upstairs, sobbing, screaming. He laid her body down near the Christmas tree. That moment, though, maybe understandable for a grieving father, was catastrophic from an investigative standpoint. By moving her, he destroyed the crime scene. Fingerprints, positioning fibers, DNA all potentially lost. Even more unsettling was what happened next. The detective later described a silent moment between her and John. Just a look, but one that gave her chills. Something about it felt wrong. From that moment on, the case spiraled into a cloud of suspicion, missteps, and mystery. What happened inside the Ramsey house that night, we still don't know. But what we do know is this: the story people thought they were watching a perfect family. The tragic crime was far more complicated than anyone imagined. The way the 911 call was handled, the way the crime scene was treated, the way people behaved that morning, it all raised questions. And for decades now, those questions have led to endless speculation, but no real closure. To this day, we still don't know what really happened to JonBenet Ramsey. Even the FBI had concerns. They pointed out that the ransom note, 3 pages long, was highly unusual. Most ransom notes are short, direct, and threatening. This one, it read like theater, elaborate, overwritten. like whoever penned it was putting on a show. Behavioral analysts picked up on a maternal tone in the language, suggesting the writer may have known the family intimately. Suspicion quickly turned toward Patsy. Handwriting analysis couldn't confirm that she wrote the note, but it didn't rule her out either. As for John and Burke, both were reportedly cleared, but the red flags kept piling up. The note was written inside the house. No intruder had broken in and left a pre-written message. And despite the supposed kidnapping, no one ever followed up. No phone call, no contact, no further demands. To some, it all felt staged. Like the note wasn't written by a kidnapper, but by someone trying to cover up something far more disturbing. Still, others pointed to another possibility. What if someone had broken in? What if an intruder had snuck inside, waited for the right moment, and taken their time writing the note, confident the house was quiet? What if they knew the layout, knew the family, and knew exactly what they were doing? Then there's JonBenet herself, just 6 years old, found later that day in the basement. The autopsy revealed she had been strangled with a homemade garrow constructed from part of a broken paintbrush. That paintbrush belonged to Patsy. Her skull was also fractured. And, perhaps most haunting of all, there were signs of sexual trauma. No semen was found, but the evidence was unmistakable. Her body wasn't tossed aside. It was carefully arranged, partially covered with a white blanket. That detail matters. Experts say a body being covered suggests something deeper. It's not how a parent typically reacts in panic. It's more common when the killer feels guilt, or shame, or familiarity. Someone who couldn't quite face what they'd done also couldn't just leave her lying there exposed. And then there's the pineapple. Undigested. Pineapple was found in JonBenet's stomach, suggesting she ate it between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. after her parents claimed she'd gone to bed. But here's where it gets even stranger. A bowl of pineapple was found in the kitchen, and Burke's fingerprints were on it. Now, no. One could say when those prints were left, but the implication was unsettling. Was JonBenet up that night, sitting in the kitchen with her brother? Did something happen then? That one unanswered question spawned 1,000 theories. And John's reaction, when he found her body, only added to the confusion. He picked her up, carried her upstairs, placed her near the Christmas tree. He wept, of course. But to some investigators, it all felt off. Almost like he already knew where she was. Almost like it wasn't a discovery but a moment he knew was coming. Some investigators believe John Ramsey had disturbed the crime scene, maybe even intentionally. But then again, picture it. A father walks into a dark basement and finds his 6-year-old daughter dead, alone, silent, lifeless. Can you really blame him for losing it? That's part of what makes this case so difficult. Motion and logic are constantly at war, because while so much about the crime suggests it was committed by someone inside the house, there's also compelling evidence pointing the other way. Let's talk about the DNA. Unidentified male DNA was discovered in multiple places. On JonBenet's underwear, on her leggings, and even under her fingernails. It didn't match John, it didn't match Patsy, and it didn't match Burke. It didn't match anyone in the FBI's National Criminal Database either. That was huge. So huge. The fact that in 2008, the Boulder District Attorney publicly cleared the entire Ramsey family based on those results. It was an unprecedented move. But not everyone agreed with it. Some forensic experts raised doubts. It suggested the DNA might have been transferred during the clothing manufacturing process. Contaminated fabric. Warehouse handling. Maybe even packaging. But others pushed back. They argued that the nature of the samples, their complexity, the locations they were found, the possibility that the DNA came from multiple individuals made the manufacturing theory pretty flimsy. Years later, in 2024, John Ramsey pushed for advanced genealogical testing, the same type of cutting-edge science used to catch the Golden State Killer. He hoped, maybe, just maybe, DNA could do what detectives and journalists couldn't, solve the mystery once and for all. But like everything else in this case, even scientific answers only led to more questions. And you know what still haunts people to this day? That moment in the basement, nearly 30 years later, still unsettling. Because John didn't just stumble on her body. He didn't wander aimlessly. He walked straight to the basement. Not just to the basement, but to a small, dark, tucked away storage room in the far corner, a place rarely used. A room without windows. A door that blended into the wall. And that's where he found JonBenet, to some that felt too convenient. Too precise. In the CBS documentary, several experts suggested that maybe, just maybe, John already knew where she was. That the search that morning wasn't a real search at all, but more of a performance. But let's pause there, because when John came up those stairs carrying his daughter, crying, shaking, his voice breaking, there wasn't a man playing a part. That was a father in pieces. And no matter what you believe about the case, that grief looked heartbreakingly real. Still, it's hard not to ask, was that moment instinct or something more? Everything in this case is tangled. But if there's one element that continues to throw everyone off, it's the ransom note. 3 pages long, written inside the house. Who, during a kidnapping, sits down and writes a 3-page letter by hand? The police initially assumed it was exactly what it claimed to be, a kidnapping. So they treated the house like a kidnapping scene, not a murder scene. That meant no lockdown, a no crime scene tape. People wandered in and out. Friends arrived. Rooms were cleaned. Clues were destroyed before anyone even realized they mattered. And just like that, the truth, whatever it was, slips through their fingers. Friends were invited over. Evidence was touched, moved, maybe even lost forever. And when John later carried JonBenet's body upstairs, cradling her in his arms, he likely destroyed key forensic evidence without even realizing it. But again, was that calculated? Or was it just a father, shattered, doing the only thing his instincts could manage? There were other oddities too. A flashlight found on the kitchen counter, possibly the weapon that fractured her skull. But it had no fingerprints, no blood, no DNA, just nothing. A length of rope discovered in a guest bedroom. No one in the family recognized it. A boot print in the basement. Unmatched to any of the family members. Even a single pubic hair on. The blanket that covered JonBenet's body, belonging to someone outside the household. And then there's the DNA. It remains the one piece of evidence that keeps hope alive. Male. DNA found under JonBenet's fingernails on her underwear. And on her leggings. And it didn't match John. It didn't match Patsy. It didn't match Burke. It didn't match anyone in the FBI's database. In 2008, a DNA was enough for the Boulder district attorney to publicly clear the Ramsey family. They said this came from someone else. We believe you, but not everyone believed them. Skeptics argued the DNA could have come from the factory where the clothing was made, left there by a worker. Accidentally transferred. Others said no, this was the killer's signature etched invisibly into the scene. And in 2024, John Ramsey pushed for advanced genealogical testing, hoping still, after all these years, that science could succeed where detectives had not, that his daughter might still get justice. But for every answer in this case, 5 more questions emerge. The broken basement window, was it how the intruder got in? Or a distraction planted to throw investigators off? Unusual marks on her body, were they from a stun gun or something more mundane, more chilling? And that 911 call, Patsy sounded frantic, desperate. But when the call ended, some audio experts claimed there were faint voices still captured on the line. One of them possibly Burke, despite the family insisting he was asleep. Was it just audio interference, or proof that someone was lying? At the center of it all stands John Ramsey. He found her body. The ransom note mentioned his Christmas bonus down to the exact dollar. He moved her from the basement, made phone calls, he gave interviews, and yet not one piece of physical evidence has ever tied him or anyone in his family to JonBenet's death. And that's what makes this case so haunting. Every clue seems to point in 2 directions. Every person feels somehow both innocent and suspicious. And no matter how many years pass, no matter how many theories are floated, nothing has ever brought us closer to the truth. JonBenet's story still echoes through her family, through investigators, and through a public that can't look away. Because despite all the analysis, the headlines, the specials, the theories, for everything we think we know, one fact remains. This case is still unsolved. Just out of reach.